footing that we just showed you is for structures of homes, not patios, not driveways, stuff like that. When you see a patio, you're always going to notice that the finished floor is going to be up here. Right? So this is your pad, this is your stem, this is your footing, right? Okay. This is the house side, this is the patio side. Patio's already going to be about 4 inches lower. That's why we're not allowed to swing doors out because of the step down. They think it's unsafe if you are pushing a door open outward and stepping out at the same time. Apparently we cannot do that well enough. So the code is that any exterior doors will swing inward. Commercial, I'll swing outward, but that's because of fire. So don't understand why we can't open the door outward and step down, but that's just how they do it. But you also notice in commercials there's not usually a step. Okay, so your patio is 4 inches lower. Now, this is your stem. We don't do a giant stem for the patio. We just do a simple turn down like this, and then we put a rebar right there, and it's called a monolithic pour, right? Because it's one pour of concrete throughout. Remember, this is 3, and this is 1. So they just call it monolithic. So if you're at your buddy's house and you're expanding the concrete, you're going to do something like this. You're not going to do a footing. You're not going to do all that stuff. You're going to do something very simple. Little trench, roll your concrete down, put a rebar in it, and then go ahead and pour once, and you're done. Okay, that's very simple. Now, garages and patios. Let's say this is my interior of my garage. You're always going to see these lines. Right? That's what your garage looks like. So if I was to look at it from laying on the ground, there'd be a little divot, so to speak. The divot is there, and usually they like to keep these about 8 by 8, 64 square feet. I don't know why, that's how mathematically the engineers have figured out that's where concrete won't crack. The idea is that we know concrete's going to crack, because remember, this is the garage floor, up against the house floor, up against the driveway. 3 different pours, concrete expands, contracts differently based on mass. Something's going to crack, something's going to give. So these little joints are called control joints. And what they do is they control the cracking. What will happen is you won't see it, but it'll crack down in there. So it's going to crack. The joint is there to help it crack. It doesn't always work. Concrete's still going to crack some other places. But that's the concept, is for it to control the cracking, and that's why they call it a control joint. Now, if you're in a garage, most garages, especially in the smaller homes, I shouldn't say most, but some, you'll see are minimum of 16 feet. So you might just see this, right? 4 blocks, that's a 2-car garage, 16 feet long, 8, 16, it's about 24 feet wide. And that's what you would see, just the control joints right down the middle. And then maybe this is the step up, and then the door getting into the house. I don't know. But sometimes if you're in there and you see 2 slabs, you can kind of guess. The distance is probably 16, 18 feet. They usually don't get much bigger than 8 by 8. And again, we talked about those expansion joints. Those are those black things. They would go between 2 pieces of concrete that are poured at 2 different times. Patios and houses, houses and garages, garages and driveways, stuff like that. Well, houses and garages are usually poured at the same time, usually. But you can kind of get an idea of how that house is put together based upon that. So another term you're going to hear now, we hear a lot. Ever since Anthem was built, it became a huge problem. This is my house slab. This is my garage, okay? 2 different slabs. You've heard post-tension foundations, right? So basically what a post-tension is, we go back to our footing is still the same, but instead, when we get to our slab, let's do it this way. There is a rod, it's a rebar rod, and they're about 4 feet on center. What they're going to do, and then the garage is done separate. It's not necessarily in conjunction with the house. So basically what you do is you take your stem wall, before you pour your floor, you run this rod and you run it right through the stem wall. You run the rod all the way to the other side, continuous, through the other stem wall. Okay? You then come in and you pour your floor, and then they have machines that tighten the rods on either side. Basically what they're doing is compacting the foundation into one piece as best they can, so that if it moves together. So it does eliminate a lot of cracking, and obviously this must be used in areas that have expansive soil. Like if you've ever been to the west side of Anthem, past the 17, that was a mess. It was all because of expansive soil. Gilbert, Queen Creek have a lot of expansive soil, so you'll see post-tension slabs now. Even the track builders are doing a lot of post-tension slabs. It's just the idea is that they hold the house together, so if it moves, this also helps the structure part. It should all move together, thus you see less cracking, less stucco cracking, less drywall cracking, less cracking all together. It is expensive, and that's why you'll see the stamp. There's a stamp in the garages that'll say this is a post-tension slab. You cannot drill into the slab. Like you have clients that want to put a safe in the house. Yeah, that's not going to happen in the slab because it's too hard to figure out where these bars are. You could get an X-ray machine, but good golly, just put a safe somewhere else. I don't know, but yeah, you can't cut through it because if you hit the rebar, you can't cut through those bars. They're way too soft. Tough. Okay, that should cover, I think, everything on foundations I wanted to go over. Let's talk about cracks a little bit. We talked about floor cracks. You're gonna see cracks in concrete because of the heat and because of the cold. They will move and they'll move separately. Obviously, let's say this is my floor. Any crack that moves out of direction and splits is a bad sign. Okay, so that's something you don't want to see. Now we're talking about floors right now. Okay, anytime this, so what happens, here's what happens. We start off with a little bit of a shift. That little bit of shift causes the floor to crack. It then settles and stops. What happens again is it shifts again, and that usually would cause the crack off of another. So that means the house has moved quite a bit. Now, if they're hairline cracks, if they're small, nothing to worry about. It's very common. The problem is if it's a 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch thick, it could be a problem. Now, the good thing about Arizona, it's very predictable. Houses stop moving in about 3 to 5 years. So 2017, you're looking at a house built in 2014, that house could still be moving. So that could be something you'd want to bring up to an inspector, an engineer, anything along those lines. I've seen houses that are continually moving or just started moving because they're brand new. After about 3 to 5 years, the houses aren't moving anymore. We've had enough inflections of heat, we've had enough inflections of cold, we've had enough wind, we've had enough rain, we've had pretty much everything we're going to see pretty consistently. So over about 3 to 5 years, the houses aren't going to move anymore. So let's say you found a crack in a floor and the house was built in the 80s. The crack isn't getting any worse. Now, it could get worse by other pressures. Let's say you have a crack like this, okay? And then you decide to dig out a pool. Well, when the dirt is pulled out, where that pool goes, this portion of the house is going to want to shift. So you can see that concrete crack again. So if the pool's already in place and you see something like this, that's probably what it was. It was an original movement, and then once the pool was built, it cracked again. Again, it was 3 to 5 years, it stopped moving. Concrete cracks are pretty easy to fix. Basically what happens is, it's pretty, let's say this is our crack. Right, we have one piece this way, and this piece kind of, whoops, not that drastic, sorry. Okay, so that's what your crack is. The house moved, this would be a giant movement, but this is just for, basically all they do is they come in with a filler, and they just fill it in. So they take your level here, and then they just recreate, obviously that's much more drastic than it'd ever be, they just fill it with a, I don't even know what it's called anymore. But it's just a concrete mix. It's a thin coat, and just goes over the crack and then levels out the floor. What's really cool is it's a liquid. They come in and they just pour it in the crack, and then they pour the excess around the crack, and it'll all level itself out. So once it comes level, there's no really scraping, there's really no, they pull off the excess, and it dries, and it's actually really, really good. I actually had a house, my very first house. We built the pool, the house moved, we picked up the carpet, and there's a giant crack. It was pretty easy to fix. It was costly, but it was pretty easy, and to this day, I assume it's okay. So, floor cracks aren't the end of the world. Here's what can be problematic. You have a crack that looks like that. Okay, keep in mind we have a footing, right? We talked about that, and bearing points. So basically this is all your corners, 95% of the time are going to be weight bearing. So this weight bearing corner, if we were drawing the house, okay, let's do it this way. Here's our stem, here's our footing, here's our floor, here's our wall, here's our truss, okay? This floor is cracked, right, in this picture. This weight coming down could continue this crack to keep going. Again, if you're past the 3 to 5 years, it's unlikely. But what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing cracking along the drywall on the roof, inside the walls, around the windows. All the cracking on this corner could get really, really bad over time. So that's something you want to keep track of. Do we ever see this? No. Only time we see it is if somebody pulls up the carpet or they have concrete floors, something along those lines. But here's the trick. Look at the stem wall. If it has a crack in it, and then go around the other side, and if there's a matching crack on that side, then you have a concern. Now, when I say crack, I don't mean a hairline crack. I mean like a crevice. Something that will look more like that, to where you could put 2 or 3 quarters in it. That's concerning. Concrete's gonna crack, so little hairline cracks aren't concerning. But when they're big like that, or you see a lot of flaking, like a lot of times you'll see a crack, like you look at the stem wall, there'll be a crack in it like this, and this is all like flaked. I can't draw very well, but this is all flaked off materials of concrete, stucco, whatever it is. That's a problem. That's problematic. That's something you want an engineer to look at. Again, if the house is, especially the house is 3 to 5 years old, could mean the house is still moving. It could be concerning. If it's older than 3 to 5 years, it's probably not moving anymore, but it still could continue to cause other damage. But check with an engineer if it's that concerning to your owner. Okay, that covers foundations.